November 20 is a day set aside by the United Nations as Africa Industrialization Day. This year's theme is Industrializing Africa, renewed commitment towards an inclusive and sustainable industrialization and economic diversification. Industrialization has helped developed countries achieve high growth rates and diversify their economies. But what is the impact of a day like this in Africa? Warmate Idikio, the founder of African Continental Free Trade Area Roundtable, joins me to discuss this, the theme, and other related issues. Hello, Warmate. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's start by taking a look at this year's theme, renewed commitment towards an inclusive and sustainable industrialization and economic diversification. I mean, it's long-winding. What does it mean, really?
Well, thank you very much for having me on this program. I'll just quickly take through to your question. Industrialization is key to the development of all the nations on the face of the earth. Now, why is it important? It is because no nation can develop effectively, or no nation can effectively eradicate or even reduce poverty without industrialization. Industrialization provides the opportunity for every strata of society to be partakers or participants in the economic sectors of the country. That, in a nutshell, is the importance of industrialization. And I think that it is very key for Africa to commemorate this day as a way of, keeping ourselves awake, if I might say that, and to ensure that we do not fall back into or relapse into our old ways. Rather, we keep ourselves jogged up to ensure that whatever commitments we have made towards developing Africa and the constituent parts or the constituent nations of Africa are kept, so that Africa will progress to being amongst the developed countries within the world.
Now, our history books tells us that the process of industrialization in Africa began in the 1920s. Can you x-ray how far it has progressed on the continent since then?
Well, I think that industrialization within Africa, yes, you could say within the 1920s, but if you take South Africa as an example, industrialization in South Africa began in the 1800s, precisely between 1865 through to the 1880s. When diamond and eventually gold were discovered in commercial quantities. And that basically set South Africa, and I think by extension, Africa, on the trajectory of industrialization. Because when resources are discovered, the next thing that follows through is basically application or implementation of strategies, both to extract and add value to those resources, which eventually, results in trade and development. So, in a nutshell, yes, in Africa, development started through South Africa in the 1800s. And then you look back to other sectors, other nations in Africa, you will discover, and that's when industrialization settled within the 1920s, following through from other nations, and then eventually through into our own country, Nigeria, in the 50s with the discovery of crude oil. So across Africa, basically, industrialization or the application of machinery for improved production and manufacturing actually took effect within the 1920s, straight through to the 50s and up till now. However, how industrialized Africa is a different question when we get deep into the impact or the effects of industrialization in Africa comparative to how it is in the West or in Europe?
I mean, it's a huge topic to cover, but from what you've said, isn't it sad really that in the whole of Africa, it's South Africa that is the only country that could be said to be industrialized, basically, and the region is seen to be the least industrialized in the world. From your vantage position, what would you think should be done to get the other over 50 countries on the same track?
Okay, thank you for that question. South Africa, like we have just said, started its industrialization process from the 1800s. And then again, you look at the structures, economic structures, the economic structures in South Africa at that period developed through the years, or through the decades up till speaking today. Now, so the important thing is to evaluate what exactly did South Africa do. Now, if you look at the structure of the economy of South Africa, one major thing that it did to ensure that it is where it is today is, one, ownership of industries. South Africa, the South African government owns about 700 of what you now call state-owned enterprises. That's the first part. Secondly, when you discover you have resources, what must follow is value addition. Once there is value addition, you'll discover the next thing that follows through to ensure that there is value addition to the raw production of resources that you have would be application of technology. Now, if you look at the South African economy, the structure shows, when you notice the kinds of industries that are in South Africa, they are hugely dependent on technology. What does technology do? Technology aids mass production. Mass production aids trade. So that is the trajectory that South Africa took. Again, you look at it in a third light, you will discover that beyond the application of technology, what happens is application or adaptation of specific or particular technology. They are referred to as technologies that aid production. So production is key to trade, which is key to development. So South Africa has adopted in three major ways, ensured that they add value to natural resources. They ensure the application of appropriate technology, and then they also engage in ownership of industry.
Mr. Idikio, in the interest of time, because this is a very short bulletin, hopefully we'll have a longer conversation on it. But before we let you go, I'd like to ask you this very key question. You are a stakeholder in the African Continental Free Trade Area. What role does the body play in trade and industrialization in Africa since it came into play? If you can make your response brief, that would be very great.
Okay, speaking briefly, the AFCFTA is very key to the development of Africa. It stands, as we see it today, as the strategic framework for the integration of the 54 national economies into a regional economy for the development of Africa. That is very key. Now, what the body is doing is tied essentially to the basic facets of the agreement, which is basically the rationalization or increasing the movement of people within Africa towards trade. trade in goods and trade in services. Don't forget, the potentials that are offered by the AFCFTA are huge. Basically, a $3.4 trillion trade bloc, which is what we are looking at. And so the integration of the economies are very key. What the AFCFTA provides for all African nations is a bedrock for internal efficiency of all African nations geared towards competitiveness of their own industrial sectors, ensuring that even small and medium enterprises, which would form the bedrock of the development of trade in Africa, become key participators in this sector. Don't forget, SMEs form about 80 to 90% of all businesses within Africa, and they are not as competitive as we require.